early stages, but we've been doing the public participation. Yeah, you can do the next slide, Steve. So the John Fitch Highway project, it's really about transportation and stormwater. The project is meant to address a lot of the drainage issues and flooding issues along John Fitch Highway, especially with relating to climate resiliency. And of course, it's also a transportation project. So we're very lucky here at DPW to have an environmental engineer, Mr. Nicholas Erickson. He's Fitchburg raised, WPI graduate in environmental engineering, and he's our assistant city engineer. He's really the one that's been spearheading the MVP program, and doing a lot of the stormwater environmental work. And the consultant team of Weston and Sampson, Steve Roy and Amanda Cohn, are here today, and they'll be helping with the stormwater design. On the transportation side, my name is Nicholas Bossinetto. I'm the Commissioner of Public Works and City Engineer. And our consultants are Fussin O'Neill, our transportation consultants, and Eileen Gunn and Nicola Point. So really, there's two sides to the project, two engineering disciplines, but we're all working together as a team. Next slide. Webinar logistics. We are recording this presentation for rebroadcast on FATV. Down below, you will see, if you join using your web browser, if you hover over the presentation, you'll see that you can turn your cameras on and off. You can mute yourself. You can also raise your hand and then post comments on the show conversation button. There's also the comment period. We have a website that we put together. You can Google John Fitch Highway or JFH project, and you should go to our website. And there's options there to include comments, upload pictures, and we'll keep taking on comments until Friday. And then we'll also have more comment periods as we progress the design. Next slide. This is a picture of John Fitch Highway before it was built, really. A lot of Baker Brook right there in this old picture. And what we want to do today is really give you an overview of the project and really talk about design concepts at this point. We're not quite to the point where we're ready to show a schematic design, a concept of the project itself. We just want to talk about transportation concepts, complete street concepts, stormwater concepts. We've also, as part of the public participation, we've had public comments come in and also the artwork challenge. So we'll be presenting the winners tonight. Next slide, please. The project objectives are really three. First and foremost is to prepare for the impacts of climate change, meaning climate resiliency. John Fitch Highway floods already. We have stormwater issues there. As climate change comes about in the future, those problems are only going to be exacerbated. So we really, part of the project here is to add green infrastructure and mitigate the flooding vulnerability. Also, by that green infrastructure is also going to help to improve the corridor streetscape and reduce the impervious area, meaning less asphalt, more green space. So that's objective number one. Objective number two is to improve the pedestrian and biking experience in the corridor by providing complete street concepts, meaning more, better infrastructure to allow for biking and pedestrians, make it safer for everybody. And of course, John Fitch Highway is our commercial corridor in the city. So these two elements really are there to promote the businesses. We want to make sure that traffic keeps moving, people are able to get in and out of the driveways more safely, and also to beautify the corridor a little bit to make it more attractive for people to come to this corridor. Next slide. So quickly, the scope project here is, you can see the red line. So it's going to be John Fitch Highway from Bemis, Summer Street intersection up to Lunenburg intersection. However, I just want to make clear that we're not including the intersection of Lunenburg and John Fitch Highway in this project. The reason being the signalized intersection at John Fitch and Lunenburg is under MassDOT jurisdiction. It's their signal. And to improve that signal, we're very aware that there's a lot of traffic backups. But in order to improve that signal, MassDOT's going to have to do a lot of work there. That bridge, they're going to have to replace that bridge eventually. There's stormwater issues, the Dunkin' Donuts situation. So that's going to be sort of a separate project, but we are going to those limits. Other than that, I'll turn it over to Nick Erickson. He can explain a little bit about the stormwater aspects of it.
Thank you, Nick. My name is Nick Erickson. I'm the assistant to the engineer here in Fitchburg and project manager for this grant project. So as Nick mentioned, we're focusing on the roadway, the right-of-way, but we're also taking a look at some of the flooding and stormwater issues out on John Fitch Highway. We're taking a really high-level look at some of the hydrology and hydraulics of the Baker Brook watershed to look for opportunities to create additional flood mitigation. And we're also looking at the stormwater infrastructure on John Fitch Highway itself, because that obviously contributes to some of the flooding issues that we experience in Baker Brook. And as Nick mentioned, we're also considering roadway design improvements to improve both vehicular and pedestrian access throughout the corridor. Next slide, please. So John Fitch Highway, as you may or may not know, it was developed in the 1950s and 60s, and it was developed really as an automobile-oriented commercial corridor. So there's lots of parking lots, lots of impervious cover that generates runoff very quickly. This quick runoff generation contributes to a flooding issue in Baker Brook. Baker Brook itself was realigned as part of the development in the 1950s and 60s to kind of go around some of the businesses that are out there. So this graphic that you see on your screen right now shows the original alignment of Baker Brook. It's the light blue shading. It kind of goes through the parking lot there and makes its way on further downstream. And then the dark blue shows the current alignment of the stream, which goes around the Cinema World shopping plaza over there with Harbor Freight and all that, and behind the rest of the businesses along John Fitch Highway before it goes on to its downstream location. Next slide, please. So I just want to give you a little bit of background on this grant program, the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant Program that is funding this project. This began about a year and a half ago. The city applied for and obtained a Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Planning Grant. And that planning grant required us to conduct multiple input sessions and a key stakeholder workshop to help identify strengths and vulnerabilities that the city has related to climate change. And so out of that grant program, we prepared a report summarizing all of these strengths and vulnerabilities that were identified and prioritized them into a list, submitted that to the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, who runs the grant program, and we became an MVP certified community. And what that allowed us to do was apply for funding under MVP action grants for projects that were identified as priorities during the planning grant phase. So John Fitch Highway was one of those things that was identified as a priority, mostly due to the flooding that's experienced down there. So we put together a grant application and submitted it to the MVP Action Grant Program for funding, and here we are. We're looking at some of these issues on John Fitch Highway and trying to figure out ways to mitigate flooding, improve the roadway, improve pedestrian and vehicular access, and that's kind of where we're at right now. As part of this project, we're looking at a few different things. A lot of it's focused on climate resiliency, as Nick Boston-Netto mentioned. So we've retained the help of Weston & Sampson to assist with looking at some of these different climate-related issues and come up with potential solutions. We've got Amanda Cohn here from Weston & Sampson, and she's going to go into a few of these things that they looked at. Alongside her is Stephen Roy, also from Weston & Sampson, and he's going to assist with some of this presentation.
Okay, thanks, Nick. I'm Steve Roy from Weston & Sampson on the stormwater team. And the little graphic on the right here is just to bring out the topic of changes in precipitation. We've seen some historical changes in our weather patterns where we're seeing more in high frequent events. high frequency, high intensity rainfall events. So our design numbers for sizing of infrastructure is getting bigger to handle more rainfall that falls in a shorter period of time. In addition to all of the stormwater design that will be upgraded, this slide that's titled Urban Heat Island is looking at the co-benefits that we can derive from this project. If we add more trees, more green infrastructure, we get the benefits of improving air quality, reducing energy costs for those buildings and areas that can be shaded, and also reduction in heat-related illnesses. The projections for the future is that we're going to have many more days over 90 degrees that we'll have to contend with. And the more trees that we can put out in the landscape, the cooler the environment will become. And right now, there's not a lot of trees out there on John Fitch Highway. As both the commissioner and Nick Erickson have stated, we're going to be using green infrastructure or nature-based solutions. These include tree planters and bioswales, as the photo on the right shows. Perhaps these also functions as barriers for safety, and perhaps we can get some green infrastructure in medians or roundabouts for the site as well. With that, I'll turn it back over to the commissioner to talk about the complete streets concept.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, so the green infrastructure part of it is what Steve just talked about, which is basically instead of just having a catch basin where all the water goes in and it goes into a pipe and out, we use grasses and trees, so nature-based solutions to filter out the water and to store some of the water. So that's what green infrastructure is, and that's one part of the project. The other part of the project is what's called complete streets. Now, complete streets is concepts, basically, the way I look at it, it's about transportation equity, meaning we provide multimodal transportation system. It doesn't matter what your disability is or what your income is or what your age or your mode of transportation. Whichever way you choose to move or whichever way you have the ability to move around, we should accommodate you, meaning making it easier for people of all ages and all incomes and all nationalities to have equal access to the jobs and the shopping and the services and recreational opportunities within the corridor. So that's really what transportation complete streets is supposed to be about, in my opinion. So really, we're going to try to make it more accessible to pedestrians and bicyclists and also transit and also cars. So it's really about making all modes more equal. Next slide, please. So another definition is a complete street is one that provides safe and accessible options for all travel modes, walking, biking, transit vehicles for people of all ages and abilities. Next slide. Okay, so these are actually, so Eileen Gunn is with us today. Eileen and I actually worked on, when I was city engineer in Lowell, we were the first municipality to really get involved with complete streets. We were one of the first ones to have a complete streets policy, and we were one of the first ones to apply for and complete a complete streets project. Eileen Gunn at the time, she was running the program for MassDOT, and now I've moved here to Fitchburg, and Eileen has become a consultant with Fuss & O'Neill, and we're very fortunate to have her on board. So Eileen, if you...
Hi. How are you today?
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see so many people attend an evening meeting. So Nick gave a definition of complete streets, and I just want to reiterate that it is a design concept that they are applying to John Fitch Highway. And just like planting trees has multiple benefits for both people and the environment, so do complete streets. The main objective of the state effort is to provide transportation options for all ages and abilities to provide all modes of transportation for people, but it also improves air quality. It reduces single occupancy vehicle trips. It gets people out walking and biking more as they feel safer in the environments that they can, and destinations that they can walk and bike to. Like Nick said, it's really about equity, so it improves equity. If you look at and it also brings a lot of economic enhancements. There's a study going on right now by the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs about what the multi-use paths are doing in terms around the state of bringing economic activity, and it's really quite astounding, the figures that they're coming up with. But if you look at this picture, you can just imagine an elderly person trying to cross that intersection on the top. It's daunting, and there's no way they would have enough time to get across that intersection. And if you look at the picture to the right of that, what they've done is they've demarcated the crossing better. They've put in bump outs and a median so that the person can have a smaller distance to cross. They can stop. They're more visible to traffic, and they can continue on across the roadway, crossing a second shorter distance as well. And then just on the lower right, you know, an elderly person out biking, feeling safe in that environment, people accessing transit, and you know, school children able to walk around. So this is sort of the vision for John Fitch Highway, is to allow more access of these modes of transportation and have these additional benefits. And Fitchburg was or does have a complete streets policy, and they've gotten I think several grants now off and have a prioritization plan as well. So not only is this consistent with the city's policy, but MassDOT also has a healthy transportation design requirement. And whenever you get funding from the state now, you have to consider bike and pedestrian infrastructure or get an exception from the Secretary of Transportation. So as you move to construction of this project and request other funding sources, this is also going to be a requirement. Next slide, please. Yeah, so that's a little bit of the history that, you know, MassDOT initiated the municipal grant program in 2015. We have over 2/3 of the state involved. It's becoming a national model. Our Secretary of Transportation has now gone to federal highway, and there's a bill introduced now to require states to adopt the same exact program pretty much in order to get a certain level of federal funding. So it's really becoming the way we design transportation. Next slide. Nick, that was your street. And this, that your Lowell project. So what this, and you may not be able to read this whole thing, but this essentially groups people in how safe they feel, you know, actually biking. There's like 1% of people are very experienced and comfortable riding out on the road, whether there's a bike lane or not. And then, you know, that decreases to people that are casual and somewhat confident in riding on the roadway. 60% are interested but very concerned about riding. So when we start to envision what could happen on John Fitch Highway, you start to think about the benefits and some of the safety measures of separating a bike lane from a roadway. And in that instance, people are very comfortable riding on that type of infrastructure. And that's really what people, even though we are constrained in New England for our roadways, people are, where there's room, they're trying to separate the bike lanes with grass strips and things like that. And that might be it for me. Is there one more slide? Yeah, there we go. So yeah, this is just, you know, some of the options that are being considered. Buffers, grass buffers between the bike lane, buffers between the sidewalks, median buffers, whether things are going to be street level, all one level or at different levels. These are the type of design considerations that you look at, and you have a very wide right of way on John Fitch, so you have a lot of options. And this is just some of the types of research and simulations that have to go into this type of analysis. You have to do traffic counts, you have to look at speed, you have to look at the crash data in that area. There's a lot of curb cuts along this roadway, a lot of very wide curb cuts. So you have to look at, providing access to businesses, but also the safety aspects of that as well.
Yeah, and the traffic counts out there is about 15,000 vehicles per day. So we just finished doing traffic counts, 15,000 vehicles per day going about 40 miles per hour. So in that environment, you really don't want to put a bike lane down because, other than that 1% of people that are very experienced rider, most people don't want to ride their bikes next to 15,000 cars going 40 miles per hour. So that's sort of the some of the numbers that are helping us design this project.
Do you want to talk about the project timeline or?
Yes. So right now what we're doing, the grant funding that we received is really to get us through the 25% design. 25% design is basically we have a good concept. We start putting the design together. We can go to MassDOT with it and get it start to think about how it's going to get funded by MassDOT. So our phase one right now is what we're trying to do is to have the 25% design by June, which is a pretty quick timeline here. But our consultants are doing a great job so far. So by June we'll have that. Phase two will be the final design and construction, and that's when we have to sort of go through the MassDOT process. And that's another thing, in order to get MassDOT federal funding for this project and state funding, we have to do the design according to their specifications. You can't just show up with a plan. The plan has to be to MassDOT standards, and that's why it costs money and time, and that's why we hired these consultants. Once we get the plans per MassDOT standards, then they can start looking at funding it. And there's a lag way there between design and also getting it funded on the TIP, which would probably be 5 to 7 years out. This is, again, we're kind of gearing up for that. It's not in any way been accepted yet. We have to jump through the hoops to get the funding. So hopefully we'll get this project built sometime in the next several years. And then after that, like I said, we're looking at the intersections. Mass DOT is looking at their intersection at Lunenburg and John Fitch. Hopefully we'll try to take care of a lot of problems just south of the intersection. That way MassDOT can proceed to design their intersection improvements. And then it would be nice to keep this going, do the next section of John Fitch Highway going up to Coolidge Park, and then connecting to other regional bike and pedestrian accommodations. The land use considerations is also something in the future when, perhaps as more commercial redevelopment happens in the corridor, they'll look at the city's example of adding green infrastructure and pedestrian-friendly infrastructure, and hopefully the private developers or the private property owners redesign their parking lots to be more green and more pedestrian friendly.
So we've got a few questions, and before we maybe move on to the second half of our presentation, Steve, if you want to stop sharing, and then I can do the Slido part of this since I have kind of the tech on my computer for that. We do have a raised hand, so we'll start there. JH is the guest with their hand raised.
Yes. So, I do have a few issues and concerns. I guess, first off, this is the best functioning section of roadway I see throughout Fitchburg. I see that on your website, you're pointing out one of the last points made is to improve access to businesses, including a grocery store and school. Are you talking about the private school, St. Bernard's? In which case, why would this be used to add access to St. Bernard's when that's just their sports field and not actually their campus, and they have their own entranceway on a different road? Why would that even be mentioned in here?
Well, so
Are we
remember,
going to be using this funding to add access to a private school that receives thousands of dollars per student?
so again, so you have to remember that this isn't just about vehicles. It's about pedestrians and bicyclists and all of those things.
Yes, I understand, but my
So,
question is, are we using this funding to help a private school have more access on multiple roadways, even though they already get thousands of dollars per student?
So no, so the answer to your question is no, we're not adding access to a school. What we're doing is we're increasing the ability of people to walk. I know Nick Erickson went to school down there, and those kids do walk, up and down the corridor. So when we talk about access and mobility, we mean all modes. We're not talking about adding a driveway. We're talking about adding accessibility to pedestrians and bicyclists and young people and old people.
Well, I don't really understand why age or race comes into this conversation, but I do understand that there is probably a need for more crosswalks to be painted, but there are sidewalks on both sides of that road. And I saw that somebody thought that a turning lane in the middle of that road is dangerous, but actually that's one of the best features of that roadway because there are so many business entrances all along that road. So what you're talking about sounds like you're going to be taking out that center turn lane and adding plants to put in a new bike path because the sidewalk isn't good for a bicycle, is what you're saying. So you want less space for cars and no turning lane so that there can be a separate bike path along this road. Is that what the plan is? Am I misunderstanding this?
Yeah, so the issue of race and income does come in because this is an environmental justice neighborhood, meaning it's an area of the city that has above average level of low income and minority people, and we have to be cognizant of their needs also. They have every right to access jobs and opportunities and shopping as anybody else, whether they own a car or not. It doesn't matter.
Okay. Well, I live right there, and I'm just saying a crosswalk is definitely needed to be added because there's a long stretch with that one, but there are sidewalks. There's sidewalks on both sides of that road.
Right. So the project is, again, crosswalks is another. This whole project started out because somebody at DCU asked me to repaint the crosswalk. And I went out there and in no good conscience could I repaint that crosswalk because it's not safe trying to cross that distance and being stuck in the middle of two traffic lanes. So that's when we started looking at median, like a refuge island in the middle. And that's when we started talking about green infrastructure. And that's how the project actually came about, was adding better crosswalks along the corridor. But this project isn't just about that. It's about the green infrastructure to deal with the flooding. And like Eileen said, in order to get the funding, you do have to make it more pedestrian and bicycle friendly. And out there, we have a lot of room to add those accommodations and make it more equitable for everybody. It's not about just taking away from cars. Cars are definitely something that we need to design for.
So is this going to be like the bike path that's being worked on right now that's now endangering cars trying to get off the highway down the road?
So this isn't a bike path. So this is basically the sidewalk that's there now. We're just going to make it wider. That way, if somebody's coming in a bike and somebody's walking, they can pass each other. They can share that. It's sort of like a really wide sidewalk. That's the way to think about it.
Well, there is a really wide sidewalk on both sides right now, but you're saying, so the road's going to become narrower. There's going to be less road.
In some parts, not all parts.
So just all the parts that are impacting my daily life and the people that live right there. And you're talking about years of construction, correct? So years of impeding flow of all types of traffic, pedestrian and otherwise, for years on the major corridor of the city.
The way we're thinking about constructing it, it's not going to be years and years of construction. We're not going to rip up the whole road. We're actually just going to, build new curbing, basically leave the road. One of the options we're looking at is basically leave the middle of the road. That way we don't have to tear out the whole road because the pavement's in good condition out there. So we don't want to tear it all up. What we're trying to do is make it just safer for everybody. Traffic calming is part of it. Like I said, 15,000 cars going 40 miles per hour, trying to make it safer for pedestrians and bicyclists and those sort of things.
So I guess the term highway is the misleading part of this road. John Finch Highway. It's not supposed to be a road that cars can get down.
It serves a lot of purposes. The road serves a lot of purposes. One of the purposes is for local access to all the businesses. So there's a lot of local access, but it also serves, as you mentioned, throughway, so cars can get through there. So again, we're designing with everything in mind. We're not designing against cars. We're designing for cars, just safer for everybody. That's what we're trying to do.
I guess I just understand the need for additional crosswalks to be painted. I understand that you need to add some sort of porous elements on either side of the roadway so that the floodwater will have some place to go. I just don't understand why this is sounding like a huge amount of money being dumped into one of the best paved sections of road, one of the best flowing and functional sections of road in the city, when there are literally dozens upon dozens of other streets that look like they're in a third world country with gigantic potholes that could eat up cars all over the city. And you're going to take all this time and effort to beautify and make this look like it's something out of like Cambridge, a roadway that otherwise is already functional and has two gigantic sidewalks on both sides of the road.
So the funding actually comes from different pots. So the paving money that we get comes from Chapter 90. That's the money that DPW gets to pave roads, and we're trying to pave as many roads with that money as we can. This money is coming from a grant funded. So the MVP, and we're actually using this money in a very innovative way. We're using this money to design improvements to a roadway. So there's two different pots of money that, we have to access all the pots of money that we can and use them as they're able to.
Well, so which pot of money does the continued maintenance of this come from?
So I just want to jump in to say we're getting some messages in the chat that some people can only stay till 6. We do have the winners of the artwork challenge that are with us, and so I'm wondering if we can pause the conversation and pick up questions after we do just announce the winners of the artwork challenge, talk about some of the comments that we have heard. Definitely appreciate the conversation and the need to make sure that we are thinking about vehicles and we're doing the simulations. And
I mean, I live right where you're talking about doing this construction. This is very much going to impact my everyday life for a long time. And like, you guys already started the meeting late, and now you're telling me that I can't have this conversation when this is the allotted time to have that conversation. If other people want to unmute themselves and have this conversation too, great, but it's a bit offensive that we're all taking time out of our day. I'm not trying to be the only one talking, but I literally live right there.
And we appreciate your comments, and we'll take them into it. Just we want to show the artwork that the kids did. They spent a lot of time, the little kids did doing artwork, and we want to announce and there'll be other opportunities for feedback. So thank you.
So I'm just gonna hop in here to the artwork challenge. So those that aren't familiar with this, we have been collecting comments on the project for over a month, and we also collected artwork from several different categories. So 12 or younger, 13 to 18, and then we had 2 categories for 18 plus for hand-drawn or computer generated, and we're going to announce the winners of that challenge here today and also talk about some of the comments that we've heard to date. So this is one of our first artworks. This is a hand-drawn submission from Isabella Madonolo, and so we've got a bridge going across John Fitch Highway. We've got a flower shop, Tesla charger, lots of innovation here, and so we want to thank you. We actually had a tie for the under 12s, and so here's our second submission. Again, you can see that trees were highlighted here. We've got another bridge across. And this is from McNennis. Sorry if I'm saying these names incorrectly. But thank you again for your submission. And for our last under 12, we've got kind of the current conditions here. An unsafe side. We've got a little car crash demonstrated here, and a safe side. Lots of trees. Love the walking on the path here. And this one is from Ava Betancourt, and we thank you for your submission. And this is from youth 13 to 18. And this is also, let me get the name here for the correct one. Is from Camila Hernandez Umana. So thank you for your rendering. We've got an e-bike here demonstrating a vision for environmental and mobility enhancements to this corridor. And here is a hand-drawn submission in the adult category. This is from Gina Villafone. Again, sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. So Gina offers creative solutions like using upcycled materials for benches, rainwater basins, signage, colorful walkways to designate areas for pedestrians and bike areas. Again, thank you for your submissions, and thank you to everyone for your submissions. We are going to be providing gift cards to our winners. And we have been in touch to grab your addresses so we can send those out to you. And so I'm gonna go next to just some comments that we've heard through our comment period. Again, I put a link in the chat. This is open until Friday, so please feel free to continue to share ideas there. We did hear from quite a few folks that different roadway elements are of interest. So thinking about, again, the crosswalks, which we've heard a lot about tonight, making it easier to bike safer and providing amenities like bike parking and things of that nature. We also have an ask to make sure whatever we do is durable and low maintenance, giving a head nod to how busy DPW is and making sure that this is something that is able to look beautiful and be maintained into the future. You'll also note that Lunenburg did come up in a big letter here in our word cloud. And we recognize, as Nick pointed out, that this is kind of a problem area and is something that MassDOT is considering since it is under their jurisdiction. We've got a call to maintain traffic flow and to think through that on design. Lots of people interested in more vegetation to provide air quality, shade, and to help with some of the environmental considerations in this area. We've had a few asks to look at how this connects to the regional bike work, but also to think about how the Baker Brook and Falula Brook watershed needs to be considered as we think through resilience for this section of the city. And then land use configurations. So thinking through how do we support businesses as they redevelop, get new buildings, making sure that there's some flexibility in building closer to the roadway, making things brighter, updated, and how do we make sure that we're also incorporating resilience into those new land use configurations. So I wanted to kind of end off things here before we go back to discussion of just how you can stay updated on this project and stay involved. So there is a project website page where we're going to continue to post updates, but we're also posting on social media. There was the link to the comment period. There's a different one here listed on the screen that I put in the chat, but both of them work. Both of them take you to the same place. We will have another meeting in May or June, but in between here and there, we do plan to have a survey that will be looking for feedback on different concepts that we're taking a look at. Again, hope that you'll join us on social media to stay updated. And if you have any questions or comments, we have set up an email address specific to this project so that we can make sure that we're collecting comments in one place and getting everything addressed. So I do have want to say a thank you to everyone, and especially to the MVP program for funding this project. And I'll kick it over to Nick and Nick to see if you want to round us out before we open it back up to discussion.
Thanks, Amanda. I'd also like to thank Hillary King from the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. She's our regional coordinator who's been helping provide guidance for this grant program just to make sure we're on the right track, and she's been doing a great job and giving us very helpful suggestions. I'd like to thank all of you for coming tonight. We did hear some great input from people, and we'll continue to solicit input at every step of the process. And we do appreciate all of the comments that we have received and will continue to receive. Nick, you all want to say anything else before we wrap it up and open up some more comments?
No, I just want to thank the team, doing a great job so far. And I want to thank all the public and all the comments and all the children that submitted artwork. We're really trying to go out there and get as much public input from everybody as possible. This is, I think it's going, so this is just the beginning of it. We are going to have more meetings. As we mentioned, there's going to be another public meeting coming up. There's still opportunities for comments. And yeah, it's just, thank you, everybody.
Okay, so I did see some questions in the chat here a while back. So I will scroll up here. And Mary Jo, I see you've raised your hand. Do you want to chime in while I get to the top of our questions? I think you might be on mute or we can't hear you.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's better.
I just had my volume low. So I just wanted to remind myself, I'm thinking MART, public transportation, that kind of thing. And I did see that Bonnie Mahoney was on the meeting at one point. Maybe she's still with the group. I just wanted to remind myself. Oh, good. Excellent, Bonnie. I wondered, are there any bus shelters along the project corridor zone, or when people use MART, do they do what they do in a lot of other parts of Fitchburg and just sort of stand at the roadside? And so that was one question. The other question for Bonnie is, when people use MART, if they're dropped off on one side of the road, but they want to patronize, say, the other side of the road, do they have to walk a few blocks to a crosswalk then? Or I just don't know about, MART users that might get off the bus and then want to patronize a business on the other side of the road. How does that work?
So MART has stops on both sides of John Fitch Highway. We do not have any bus shelters on John Fitch Highway, mostly because we drop off right at so we have a stop at the Market Basket on one side of the road, and then we pull in towards Cinema World on the other side of the road. So we do have stops on both sides of that very wide corridor. So nobody has to cross the road, you know what I mean? Unless they need to do business on both sides, then, then that's, but if they're riding the bus to get to one side or the other, we do both sides of the road. So, and, we come from the intermodal down Lunenburg Street and then, take a right. And then when we get back to Lunenburg Street, we take a right because then we head to Walmart in Lunenburg. So that's sort of that's the Route 7 bus. So anyway, I think I answered both your questions, right, Mary Jo? Okay, very good.
Mary Jo, you also had a question related to the shared two-direction turning lane.
Yes, the reason I asked it was I don't see many of them in other communities anymore. Nick probably knows, but both Nicks probably know better if that's still. It just felt like it's sort of a old-timey arrangement, and I wondered in roadway design, has that fallen out of fashion due to safety? I know as a young driver, when I was first learning, I lived in a community that had one, and the teenage group, we used to call them the suicide lane. I don't know if they still call them that anymore, but it just feels real dangerous. And I just wondered, is that an old time element in our corridor?
Yes, Mary Jo, that's absolutely correct. You've used the same colloquialism as I have on numerous occasions. And if you look at John Fitch Highway, there's some parts where you have the two-way left turn lane. That's the technical term for it. That there's no, as you go from like Bernardi and Bowl up to Upham Street, there's really nowhere to turn. So why is it even there? It was just kind of built that way. No thought was given into if there's any need for it. But so we're not, so we are, we're going to keep some turning lanes in there. You're of course going to need a turning lane onto Upham. You're definitely going to need a turning lane into the shopping malls. Up at Lunenburg Street, you definitely need turning lanes. So it's not, we're not getting rid of it everywhere. It just, there's specific sections where it could do away with, but there's definitely going to be left turn lanes to get out of the way.
We had a question about crash data at the intersection of Lunenburg Street, Townsend Street, and Batuli Street. Those are outside of our project area, so we haven't taken a look at them. I'm sure they might exist from previous projects, but we haven't dug into them for this particular project.
Yes, and like I said, Mass DOT is in charge of the intersection with Lunenburg, and one of the reasons that project was going to go forward was because of crash numbers. But one of the things they want the city to do is take care of some of the access issues, access management, meaning how all the driveways are sort of everywhere, how cars can back out into John Fitch Highway. So we're working with MassDOT, and like I said, we're taking care of the project south of the intersection, and then that's going to help MassDOT, improve that intersection sometime in the future.
And we did have a question from Ralph about the awareness of a model that's being developed, and we'll definitely reach out to them. So thank you for bringing that up in the conversation. And besides that, I think we've got all of the questions in the chat, and we've just got another hand raised here. So Bonnie, do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I know this is probably a few years off because it's probably going to happen more when we get into the TIP process. But I know you're saying that the intersections aren't a part of the project itself. You're just dealing with the roadway between the two intersections. Do you know if MassDOT is going to pick up working on the intersections when they roll it into the TIP process?
Well, so we are in discussions with Mass DOT. The project was on the TIP, and I think Brad Harris is on here. He can probably speak to it more than I can. But the MassDOT project at the intersection was on the TIP in the appendix, and it dropped out eventually. So we're gonna, again, we're gonna meet with District 3, Arthur Frost, and those guys to go over the concept and discuss this project further.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more raised hands. JH has another comment or question.
Yeah, could you just give me the email address that was on that slide? Because clearly I'm not allowed to talk during this situation.
The floor is open.
No, I'm referring to comments about me in the chat section. Anyways, what's that email address?
Yep, I will. It's jfhproject@fitchburgma.gov, and I'll pop it in the chat if you just want to copy and paste, if that's easier.
Yeah, I just think maybe like a coloring contest in the middle of this type of meeting is a bit counteractive because it's you know, people can't really spend time trying to say what they're trying to say so quickly in such a tight time frame while trying to also give away like awards or whatever. Thank you.
All right, well, it's 6 o'clock on the dot, so we can all go home now. Thank you, everybody, for participating, and thank you, everybody. And just keep, keep participating through the website and the emails. And we look forward to seeing you again in a couple months. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.